Welcome to the Becoming a Pilot podcast, where we share first-hand experiences, practical advice, and insights from pilots at every stage of their journey. I'm your host, Dave Angus, and whether you're just starting out or working towards your next rating, we're here to help you navigate the path to becoming a pilot. So buckle up, stay tuned, and let's talk all things aviation.
This podcast is brought to you by Genesis Flight College, Canada's premier flight centre. With an advanced fleet of Diamond aircraft and experienced instructors, Genesis Flight College provides top-tier training in the heart of southern Georgian Bay. Ready to start your journey to becoming a pilot? Inquire today.
Welcome back to the Becoming a Pilot podcast. My name is Dave, and for any new listeners, I'm one of the flight instructors here at Genesis Flight College, and I am with my friend and fellow flight instructor here, Sarhvesh. Sarhvesh, welcome to the show, buddy.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Pleasure. Yeah.
So, it's an honor to be here. Just want to take you guys just a bit through my journey, like how I got here. Right?
Sure. Yeah.
So I first started off, even just how I even started off with aviation, it was my first plane ride, right? Is when my parents were moving to Canada.
Cool.
When that pilot, the captain, or the first officer, went for that full throttle on that takeoff roll. I thought that was the coolest thing.
Nice.
Right? You get pushed back to your seat as this 9-year-old boy. I'm like, whoa, what is that? That power, the sound of the engines. And then ever since that day, I looked outside, even through the window on that flight, and I was like, well, this is a cool job. This is something that I really think I want to get into. And then after high school, I ended up considering a few different options as to what I wanted to do, how I wanted to go about my aviation career. Ended up choosing publicly funded college. It was a difficult decision because that publicly funded college was 7 hours away from home.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Where was home?
Home, well, at that point was in Brampton.
Okay, yeah.
Now I live in Wasaga Beach.
Nice.
But home at that point was Brampton. So it was a 7 hours drive to the north.
Yeah.
Right? It's something that I was used to more of a city sort of lifestyle. And I was like, well, how am I going to do this, more rural type thing? But anyway, I talked to my parents. We figured out the funding and all that kind of stuff. And then ended up making that first big step towards my aviation career.
Right.
That was the first real step. Oh, it's getting started.
Was it your first time flying in a small plane?
Yeah. So what I did, I actually did a discovery flight.
Oh, we did, I'd say.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's something that I think we would suggest as well all the time, right?
100%.
It's doing that discovery flight really gets you. Can I really do this? Yeah. It's that excitement and seeing if you can handle a small plane.
Sure.
I think those bigger planes are a whole different thing. Handling these smaller planes where you can feel everything.
Different world.
Yeah. Right. Anyway, I did my discovery flight and I was like, oh, this is amazing. Right. As a little side story, I was actually initially airsick.
Oh, okay, yeah.
My first flight to Canada, I puked once.
Nice, okay.
But anyway, the second flight I ended up taking, I was like, wow, I am airsick. I was uncomfortable for this 14-hour journey. So this is something else that I consider. I'm like, can I really be a pilot, especially if I'm airsick? But during the discovery flight, I found that, I wasn't as airsick. And I find that the more you fly, you build up that natural immunity to it. Right? So the first few weeks when I started my flight training, it was, I did feel a bit nauseous, but I think it would have been a bit of nerves in play there as well. Right?
Sure.
Nerves in play, plus, hey, can I really do this? Anyway, that was a little side story, but I got over my air sickness. Now, I'm here, so really got over that. But I did I went to this publicly funded college. I did that for about 3 years, 3.5 because COVID was in there as well. So that kind of threw a wrench in it.
Sure.
Once I was done that, I actually took 2 or 3 months off. I was considering my next options. And where I did it, you don't really have breaks. There's no vacation time. It was just Christmas time. And it was very rigid where I couldn't just go home anytime I wanted to go see my family and all that kind of stuff, right? It was very...
Did it have the summers off or no traditional...
No traditional summers. So you didn't have courses where you were doing in-class stuff, but you were doing flying. That's when you were really flying because summer is the good months to fly.
Sure.
It wasn't I want to take 2 weeks off to go see my parents.
So 3.5 years of that.
3.5 years.
That's a long time.
Yeah, it was difficult, right?
We do, similar program here. It's 18 months. Yes, it's rigid. Yes, it's straight through, but half the amount of time Which can be tough, like as a young guy, like moving away from home for the first time. Like as much as we don't want to admit it, we want to pretend like we're tough.
No,
There's something
hard.
comforting about home,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. And being 18 and moving out, not being able to, see your parents or whatever as much as you would like to. Whereas like, exactly here, it's only half the time. So you really have that option. Like, hey, once I'm done, I still get to go back to my family. Whereas there, I was like, I had to persevere through 3.5 years.
Sure,
of that.
that's tough.
It's mentally sometimes it is tough too, right? So you just got to push through. Anyway, once I finished that, I took about 2-3 months off. I just wanted to, take a break, just kind of refresh my mind, really clear up whatever I wanted to do. And then my parents actually ended up moving to Wasaga Beach about 2 years, about a year before I finished the school. And naturally so, we are based in Collingwood, right? So
How convenient.
How convenient, yeah. And so I did some research with a lot of different flight schools before I even, I always suggest to every single person is, like you would suggest too, I would assume, like research, right?
Yeah.
Do your pros and cons, just figure out, hey, is this the best option for me?
Right.
So I did that, and I came to the conclusion, well, Genesis, they really stood out in multiple different ways. And the biggest pull factor for me too with Genesis was their fleet. Right. It's not really such an advanced fleet compared to other flight schools. And I found the fleet here, I wanted to train on that glass cockpit, really, because my end goal is the airlines, right? Getting that right seat in that, whatever airline that may be in the future. But I found that Genesis will set you up really well for that, right? Especially for what my desire is in the long term.
Well, you bring it up glass cockpit, and I think we said it in the other episode as well, is that now we're seeing a lot of that at the airline level, asking for how much glass cockpit experience do you have, and it's because the G1000 is so advanced. Whether you're going and flying a PC-12 or you're going and flying a 737, the glass experience is huge. And a lot of people kind of downplay that in maybe the PPL. Maybe it's not as important in the PPL stages. But after that, it is really a big thing. And when you go and you say, now as an instructor, I have 1,000+ hours of glass cockpit experience, that's a real differentiator when it comes to candidate A and candidate B, right? Which may be the difference of you getting a job or not, especially in a market now that is so saturated in first officers, right? You need to put yourself ahead. And glass cockpit is one of those things, right? And everyone, it seems like they come out of instructing with 1,000 to 1,500 hours of experience, and that's great. What makes you different? What makes you the better candidate? And for you, we know that that's 100% on your ATPL test, but we know that you're an all-star in that realm. But not all of us are like that, right? Some of us need some experience to prove our worth, right? So, so you did that. You came, you landed on Genesis to do your instructor rating, right? You did that with Pete here.
That's
right?
correct, yeah.
And then what started working?
Yeah, so instead of Genesis, because of obviously all the different pros and cons that a lot of pros. Right?
Yeah.
So to Genesis, so I chose Genesis and did it for about 3 months, 2.5, 3 months for the instructor program. The day I passed my flight test was the day I shook David Gascoigne's hand. The same day I was like, okay, and then that's when I started with my instructor job here. And it's been an experience ever since. It's been a good experience, a valuable learning experience. And I find that it's something that really builds confidence, especially, you have to handle a lot of different people. At the same time, you have to have quick reflexes in that plane. So it's really improved my flying skills as well, like at Genesis here. Yeah,
it is incredible how much instructing does make you better. And a lot of people say, oh, you don't touch the controls. Well, really, unless you're showing someone something, we don't.
We don't. It's true.
But there's something to be said about when you constantly talk somebody through, let's say, a landing, right? You really are building your skills in a lot of ways. And it's the little things, like for steep turns, let's say. Everybody in steep turns, eyes come inside and then they're all over the place and they just chase it, right? And I'll be the first to admit that during my PPL and probably even in my CPL test, I did the same. So it's easy, just bank to 45 degrees. I know my instrument skills were fine, just staring, it's easy, right? I can cheat it. Then when you start instructing and you start looking outside, you're teaching the proper ways, then you realize how easy it is to look outside. And now my steep turns, my eyes never come inside. I'm looking outside and it's a non-issue. And I did have a lot of issues with my steep turns in my CPL test. Like that was my big thing. And I remember going up practicing. And it was because my eyes would always come in and because I just thought I knew better. little I know Pete knows better.
Yeah, of course.
But it does improve your skills, right? And I know a friend of mine, he didn't go down the instructing route. He went down the medevac route, went up into northern Saskatchewan and did that. And when he went to do his sim eval, they said, okay, like you got to do a steep turn now. And he said it was the worst steep turn. He goes, I'm so thankful they didn't have a lot of applicants because there's no chance they would have taken me. But you know what? When are you going to do a steep turn when you're flying medevac? You're never going to practice that, right? Mm-hmm. So great experience in other regards. Lots of IFR, lots of multi-crew, and he was all multi-engine time. But no real hand flying practical skills like that, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So big advantage with that going down the instructor route. Mm-hmm. And you've enjoyed it so far? Or?
Yeah, I've enjoyed it, and really it's coming across a variety of different people. You know, and you teaching, you have to adapt. Like you have to go home sometimes and just really think like, okay, how can I adjust my teaching style to really help the student be successful? And I find that's part of the challenge and the fun experience, because sometimes I go home and I'm just cracking my head. I'm like, oh, the student's really struggling with this. Like, what can I do differently? Or can I just, go ask, come to you maybe. Right. Hey, do you have any suggestions to stop? I find that it's a fun aspect of
for sure instructing. Yeah, the problem solving. It's a great skill to have. You need to be a good problem solver to be a pilot, but it really harvests that skill to always be trying to look at, okay, you're dealing with people, and then how do you fix their problems, right? How do you fix, let's say, one of the biggest ones is landing, right? I'm sure a lot of people listening to this struggle with something that's probably landings. We all were there, right?
Yeah, landing.
So it's going home, okay, how can I fix that? Well, what I've done every other time with my students isn't working. And sometimes it's small. Sometimes I know for me, a lot of students, when they're struggling with the round out portion of it, I give them a booster seat, right? I give them a cushion underneath, right? So they go a little bit higher. So if somebody's flying in a diamond, if you're not familiar with diamonds, the seat is fixed. It doesn't move up or down like a Cessna would. So we use cushions. So if someone's flying in a Cessna, you could put that seat up. It's going to give you a better visual outside. Because a lot of people, as soon as that nose comes up and they lose that runway,
oh yeah, the center line.
It's unnerving. Yeah. I fly with a lot of people who are airline captains and training captains, and I'll do a flare and they lose their mind, right? Because
they're not used to it.
They're like, we hold an attitude. I can see the runway the whole time, right? So it's getting that comfortability, and sometimes that's just raising the seat. Mm-hmm. As simple as that, right? What are some things that you've found with other students that have been have a big struggle point?
I mean, it's funny you bring that up, because I actually had a student, he's a slightly taller guy, but I told him, I'm like, hey man, you might actually need a booster seat. And initially he looked offended.
Yeah. We all get a little
offended. Are you going to be short? No. Yeah. Right. I was just like, it might, try it. It might help improve that sight picture.
Right.
He had that booster seat and it was a game changer. He's like, man, thank you for helping with that. I can really see over that canopy now, right? That dashboard. And you could see everything. And he was like, this is perfect. That attitude that you were talking about,
right?
That cruise attitude, I can now see it.
Right.
It's not like, what do you mean 3 fingers? What do you mean 4 fingers?
Yeah.
It's those small little things. And especially when it comes to landings, like that's honestly the biggest struggle that I find most of the time, is that round on and flare, because it's your sight picture, right? It really comes down to where you're looking and which specific moment you transition your eyes.
Right.
I've had a couple of students that we've gone up in the aircraft, just doing that on repeat, and I find that they're not really improving. And flight training is not cheap.
No.
Right. Doing that repetitively in the cockpit, it really balloons your budget, and all of that. So I've even suggested to them, at Genesis here, we have the MR sim, a mixed reality sim.
Yeah.
It's quite replicative of the DA40 itself and how it flies.
Right.
And I find that, that thing is amazing, because you can actually see where they're looking.
I know, it's cool for us.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty neat.
Because half the time I'm asking, are you looking at the end of the runway? They're like, yeah. But I can see they're not looking right below them, right in front of them. And that's what comes down to making that difference as to whether you have a nice smooth landing, or whether it's going to be all 3 wheels, a light still slam down.
Yeah.
And I find that some of my students and I try to encourage all of them to go into this MR sim because, you help improve your skills. And especially when you're in the plane, you're just struggling on the same thing. Sometimes you might need to take a step back and just look at, hey, how can I actually change? Sometimes it's just the position you're seating, where you're looking, right? It's not just your hand flying skills. It's just, hey, are you doing the right thing for that specific exercise?
Right. You said something there about looking or transitioning your eyes. And that's something that time and time again, everyone does it. And it's a bad habit that we actually pick up normally from driving, right? Everyone kind of looks out the front of their car, right in front of them, right? Should always be looking down the road, but we get bad habits. And if you think about how many hours you spend driving, right? We all have thousands and tens of thousands of hours driving, so we pick up bad habits. And that can translate into the airplane, right? And so what happens is that we start rounding out, the eyes drop right in front of the airplane, and we start counting lines, essentially, is what I say, right? So at what point would you say, do we transition our eyes down the runway?
You know, it's something that's also sometimes hard to get the student to see it for the first time, right?
Right.
Because you keep telling them, man. I always say, like, really wait for that runway rush up on you. And I say the biggest part where you can do this is, again, in the sim.
Right.
Because I can pause it. This is what you want to see. You see the split second where that runway is rushing up on?
Yeah.
Right here is what you want. Now is that point to transition your eyes, get into that cruise attitude.
Exactly.
So in the plane, like in that split second, they miss it.
Yeah.
Right? And
I always wish that in the sim, like, like at home sims, how you can go to a camera angle outside. I wish I said you could do that, where you could like
see how
pause
high you
it, put a camera angle outside and be like, look at how high you actually are, right? Because a lot of times, like, they're round too high, and understandably, they don't want to crash into the ground. But being able to like go outside and be like, look, you're actually like 8 feet off the ground.
Yeah.
Like, go lower, right? Because what we're striving for is to get as close as we can to the ground without touching it, and then allowing, like, arresting that descent rate, and then transitioning to the ground, right? But it's unnerving, and it's tough for first, someone who's learning how to fly, to be able to put that all into practice. And then there's you and I in their right ear saying, oh, more right rudder, more left rudder, right? No, pull back. Don't stop pulling that far back. Okay, nose down, a little more. Like, it's tough, right?
It's overwhelming, right? Especially when you first I had the same issues when I came to my first solo. I had to repeat that lesson maybe twice. I even hopped in the sim, and it just comes down to, well, your instructor is chirping at you the whole time. It's like, oh man, I'm trying to focus on flying the plane.
I know.
And then you get into a round and flare, you forget that, hey, my feet exist too.
I know.
And it's just so many things working at once. You really have to get everything working.
Well, that, for me, like, what I remember, and this was right through my commercial as well, my biggest, I don't know if I'd say challenge, but fear was crosswind landings. Because and this is kind of another thing when picking your school, like, the one that I went to had 2 intersecting runways, and then they would tell you which runway you're using, almost like controlled, but it wasn't controlled. So you're always landing with pretty well a headwind or a very slight crosswind. So I never had to build on those skills. Here it's a little bit different because all the weather and, we have mostly comes from the west or from the northwest. So we're always kind of having a crosswind on our runway because we have the one runway, right? Something to kind of think about when you get into flight training, because if I did all my training there, never got into a crosswind, then went into an airline, let's say, or even as an instructor and never done a crosswind landing, it's a little horrifying. But my thing was the crosswind landings, because I was always like, okay, my thing was always, which wheel has to hit the ground first? What do they keep, they keep saying? Like, I go wheel, like main, and then nose. I'm like, which one is it? Is it the upwind? Is it downwind? What even is upwind? What is downwind? Like, I was always like, and try to think so much about that. And now what I say to my students to just simplify it, and it makes everything so much easier, is, okay, we get onto final, and we use our rudder to correct our heading, okay? And we use our aileron to get our track. So the first thing I say, get your track. Get yourself, so you're going down the runway. Our nose may be crabbed off to the side, but let's get down the runway. So now they're lined up, and we're a couple miles back at this point. Now put your rudder in, okay? Okay, so I put my left rudder in, and we've got a right crosswind. I put my left rudder in, and now my nose is down the runway. So now I'm tracking down the runway. Now I'm heading down the runway, and now I'm at about 1.5 miles. Still got lots of time. It's got a little bit of a leg workout maybe, but you're fine. You're holding that, right? And now I'm just landing the plane like normal. So instead of thinking what wheel's going to hit the ground, because naturally with all that rudder in, let's say I have my left rudder in, I'm going to have to counter it with aileron, or else it's going to keep pushing us off to the side.
Yeah.
So now you're going to come down with the wind side wheel down, because that's what's going to keep you tracked. Your nose is already down the runway, so you're not going to side load. And I'll just land the plane.
Yeah,
and here you go. Main, it'll be right main, left main, nose comes down.
Don't have to overthink that process.
Right. And that was something that I always found so difficult when literally, because like you said, there's a million things in your head, and the instructor's not helping it by giving you 6,000 instructions. And so it's difficult. So that's something to kind of a little tidbit of information there that I like to give my students. Just set yourself up way back. I know Ted talks about this too when he was flying the jets in the military, right?
Yeah.
Flying an F-104 and they're on a 10-mile final and they're having to hold those crosswind inputs for 10 miles, right?
It's a workout.
It's a workout, but you're going to have a good crosswind input, right? So we talked a little bit about that, about picking your flight school. You said that you went the publicly funded, which publicly funded is definitely an option for some people. I think the biggest thing, like I said, you're a bit of an anomaly because you're
just work hard.
Probably the smartest guy I know.
Just worked hard for it.
You definitely have a great work ethic. But some people, like the average there is about 30% success rate, right? So for the right person, fantastic. Could work for them. But for your average people, we actually see a lot of spillover that comes to a private career college because we do have a higher success rate in the private career college sector, right? Because it's a business, we're a little bit more motivated by that, right? Yes. We want people to succeed. Not that the colleges don't want people to succeed, but they're funded from other places other than just the student. Government funds them, and they're getting that pretty well regardless. So what ends up happening is they bring in a lot more people with the expectation that people aren't going to make it in. So private career colleges are going to bring in what they can handle, because if they can't handle them and they don't have enough airplanes, well, then they look really bad and business goes down. Doesn't look good, right? So advantages to the private career college sectors is that you're probably going to be more successful in that. But like we've said, there's many ways to go about it. I went the modular way. So you went private career college, I went modular, and then we have people here that are in the cadet program, right? So the cadet program, how that differentiates, so it's an integrated ATPL. So you can write your ATPLs earlier. Very structured, just like the public. But they start with a conditional job offer, right, with Flair Airlines, so that when they're done, they have a path, right? And there's other pathways out there that are a little bit different, right, that are more traditional in the sense where you do your integrated ATPL, you become an instructor, and then you flow in. So there's different options. This one's pretty well one of a kind. It's a little more popular out in Europe. We're starting to see them come here more. But having that path to an airline, and nothing against flying a Q400 or something like that, but you're going right into a jet, which is huge, right? Yeah. So for the right person, again, that's a very difficult program, very structured program. You got to be able to hit those checkpoints, but very attainable, right? Mm-hmm. We just had our first class graduate through. It was good to see. Successful. It was nice to see. We do know it's a new program, but we can see that it is successful, and we are able to make that happen in such a short time, 18 months, right? Yeah. So, advantage time for sure. A little bit more expensive than let's say the public sector, but a totally different product. And you alluded to aircraft selection, right? So some sort of standardization between all the aircraft is very important, right? Yeah. And we talked about that in another podcast, why that's important. However, having that standardization, knowing which aircraft, doesn't matter which aircraft you go into, you can perform, right? What if your flight test airplane, right, goes down? You don't want to be euchred, right?
Yeah, I know. Like half the time, that's the issue too. A lot of people are like, oh wait, I don't want to fly this plane. No, right. You hear that standardization really helps with that. Yeah, just the points as well. Success rate, that's the biggest thing. Right. Here we have a very high success rate compared to some of these publicly funded colleges, right? Yeah. Just even speaking from my own experience, when you first start off, you have like your friend group, first semester, you don't touch a plane, whatever. But then after that first semester, you really start to trickle out. A lot of people start to trickle out. Even my roommate, he ended up, he wasn't successful, but he actually went the private career college route, and now he has his full licenses, and he's extremely successful now.
Right.
Right. So it's a path that it doesn't work for everyone.
Sure.
Right. Because that success rate, right? That's the biggest thing. If it, like, I wanted to do something like that, it was
Sure.
just kind of a small thing, but you always have that fear in your mind. Am I going to be successful? Whereas with like a private career college, just statistically, you have a higher chance of finishing that program and getting your licenses.
Right.
Right. So I think that's a big advantage. And then, with standardization of the fleet, like, you want to be able to transition from your, small single engine, like we have the DA20 through DA40 and then on to the DA42, which is our twin. The transition's very similar, right? The layout and all that. It's just maybe now on the multi, you just have one more engine that you have to deal with. But the transition shouldn't be too difficult, right?
No, it goes pretty seamless, right? And it is really nice. And a lot of students go, well, at first glance, they go, oh, this is a lot simpler than the 40. It's the systems that make it complex and totally change everything and make it difficult. But yeah, it's not like, I know for me, I went from 172 to a Seminole, which was fine. Like, again, like there's no way there's many different ways that you can get your licenses and be successful, right? But like I was saying, now that we're getting a saturated field of first officers, they're having a real captain shortage right now. What is going to separate you from the next person? And maybe that is a more respected school. Maybe that is a glass cockpit, right? When it comes down to teaching, Transport Canada has done a great job at standardizing what a flight instructor needs to teach, right? We're structured that we have a syllabus and all of that. That's all great. But as far as instructors go, we're all held to a pretty high standard. And I think right across the board, instructors overall are pretty good, right? We have a great group of instructors here. I find that we all teach very similarly. A lot of us have been taught by Pete.
Yeah,
and Pete's a fantastic class one that, nothing but good things to say about him and his abilities, right? Fantastic. But normally when I say, if you're looking at a flight school, those are the kind of things that you want to look at is, the fleet. Yes, it costs a little bit more to fly a modern fleet, but the fleet is going to be less time in the shop, right? Huge thing, right? A lot of people, we see some other flight schools where their students can't do multi-engine training because the multi-engines can't stay online, right? It's very rare that our multi-engines go out, right?
For a long period.
Yeah, we have a large enough fleet, right? Large enough instructor base that people can fly pretty much as they want, right? So those things are all advantages to one Genesis, but private career colleges as well. And then you can also do everything, right? So the private career college, for anyone who's kind of wants to dig a little bit more into that as to what the difference is between that and, let's say, a mom and pop, right? So a mom and pop, so if they're not under the private career college, there's some hazards to, let's say, be aware of. Unfortunately, in flight training, some businesses do go under. And when they're not a private career college, you're actually not protected as a student. If that school goes under, let's say, has some of your money held up in block time or whatever, right? If you have money tied up in a non-private career college, let's say you're doing a PPL there, they go under, you've lost that money.
Right, yeah.
And
not cheap.
so for us, it's all integrated into the cost, but there is actually a small percentage of our fees go in towards this fund, this private career college fund, that if we were to go out of business, which it's not something that's on the horizon. The school seems to be growing and growing. But if we were, that student could go and get reimbursement of that money that they lost, right? Which a lot of people don't think about. I didn't really know about that either.
Honestly, that's a good point.
Yeah, and it is a added insurance that most students don't even know about, right? And if anyone's looking online and they're looking at what schools are part of private career college, one, the school will put it on their website. They'll say that they're part of the Private Career College Act because it's important. But two, if they only advertise a private pilot's license on there and no commercial, then you know that they aren't under that, because they can't advertise that they do commercial pilot's licenses unless they're part of that.
Okay, so that's
they could still do it, like, because we know we can freelance. I could go freelance a commercial student right now, not part of that act and whatever, right? So they could still teach it, but they can't advertise it. So just kind of a little tidbit thing if anyone's looking at different schools.
Cool tip.
And that kind of differentiates your three? Like I'm gonna call it a mom and pop, but for or small flight school, then to a private career college, and then to a publicly funded. So 3 different options there. But for the vast majority, what you're going to find is private career colleges. So looking at fleets, looking at instructor availability, things like that's all very important.
Yeah, and I think like the biggest thing you alluded to it as well is the maintenance. In-house maintenance is a huge thing.
Yeah.
Like especially like even for me, just as an instructor, like when that problem arises, like being able to just go up to maintenance and talk to them and quickly resolve that issue is so beneficial.
Yeah.
And you also gain a lot more experience because I find sometimes I'm always curious as to, hey, why did this happen?
Right.
And just having that maintenance there, being able to explain that to you and then being able to fix it, and you might even being able to see it is, I think, a big learning aspect that can also help you, especially learning systems of the aircraft, right?
Yeah. Going in and seeing an airplane, like right now we've got a major overhaul going on one of our older airplanes, and seeing it all ripped apart. Sometimes like seeing the wings off, or seeing the fuel tanks out.
Yeah.
I love going in if the fuel tanks are out, going and taking a student and be like, this is what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah.
The fuel tank, the different sections. Hey, this is the standard tank. This is the extended tank. This little section here is why we have to fuel pointing inwards, right? So I have to go slower, else it overflows, right? Like all those things. It's pretty neat to see it. And like, you don't really get that experience without an in-house maintenance. So yeah, not only are the airplanes back online faster, something small, spring brakes on the rudder. They go out and they fix it, right?
Yeah.
Doesn't have to go somewhere else. That's huge. Learning from them, all that stuff is really nice. So perfect. Anything else you want to add?
No, honestly, biggest thing is if you're looking to start your career,
Yeah.
put your pros and cons list down.
Yeah.
Consider all your 3 different options. There's always going to be pull and pushes for different places.
Sure.
But like I said, for me, the consideration was always the fleet, the maintenance, and all of this, and that's how I came to my conclusion, right?
Yep.
Or of choosing Genesis to be the next step in my career.
Yeah.
So I encourage all of you to do the same, right?
Yeah.
It's just put that pros and cons list and see what fits you.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thanks, buddy.
Okay, thank you.
Appreciate it.
Yeah,
Thanks for
thank you.
coming out. All right. Have a good one.